Hello, everyone.
No stand.
How are you? Hello. Are my speakers in the room? Gurleen, are we here? Present? Let me see hands. There we go. Cecilia, hands. I need to see hands and faces.
Hello.
So, Cecilia and I with matching glasses. Maxine, are
How
you
have you been?
Maxine, are you here?
Yes, I am.
There you are.
Yeah.
So, what an absolute privilege to have all of you here today. This is a good one. This is a very good one. Well done. Team, for all of you, let me just put a little housekeeping note. Keep an eye on the room, please, because we have a lot of people who will be coming in, and just make each other co-hosts so that you can manage the room. So, for any of you who are new in the room, I'm Sally Ann, founder of Gleek, and every month, the last week of the month, this is kind of, we're a little bit off schedule since we didn't have it the last week of August. We host two events back to back, where one of them we really talk about things that are happening in the workplace or around human skills. And then the next event, we always have talks about, the Web3 space that we're exciting and getting, into. We actually enter our first drop of industry expert NFTs October 15th. Today is 30 days from that date. I cannot even begin to tell you how scared and nervous I am.
That's good stress. That's good stress.
As a founder. So, today's topic is very, very close to me. And I couldn't think of, better people to have different kind of perspectives. Hopefully they have different perspectives and they can friction with each other, or maybe pull on the topics apart for us. But I'll tell you my experience into the topic so you can understand why this is an important topic. So I think the first time I used the word toxic culture was when I was head of people at one of the first unicorn that came out of the Middle East, Kareem. And I went into the workplace, and it was a workplace that was growing 30% month on month. It was a workplace with very, very bright founders, McKinsey, very, very, very smart, growing their startup. And I thought the workplace was toxic, but I never once raised the mirror on myself of, did I choose a job? And I will always remember this, the founder, the first day that he accepted me in, he said to me, "Are you sure you want to take this job?" And this job, I was making 10 times much more than I was ever making. If I stayed at that job today, I would have pocketed $12 million in just 2 years of work. And he said to me, he goes, "I don't think you realize what you're getting yourself into." And, I was very full of myself, very confident. And I said, "Well, no, I'm ready to take on this role. I know my stuff." And literally it was just a couple months in, and I was in over my head, and I was slowly dying on my insides. But yet I refused to raise the mirror to myself. I just looked around at the workplace and I said, well, people just work too much here. And why is it this founder is posting numbers all the time on Slack? Every 12 minutes, he was posting numbers on Slack. And why is it? And I had all these reasons why it was a bad workplace. And it wasn't until a year or two later that I created my own startup. And I really, all of a sudden, and I really started looking at founders who wanted to build, and they were on a mission. It's a mission nobody can see and understand. And I really actually see a pattern. And I'm going to share a little bit of that pattern, talk a little bit about our coaches, and then have you guys explore the topic. I'm going to stop speaking after this, but I wanted to put that out there of why this topic is so very personal to me. So I'm honored today to have in this group. We have Gurleen. Gurleen is a business psychologist, and her company is called That Culture Thing. Gurleen helps people set and create culture within their organization. We have Cecilia, who is and we have different perspectives, country perspectives too, right? So we have Gurleen from India. We have Cecilia from Lebanon. Cecilia looks at HR and team performances. She's also a lecturer at the university. And we have Maxine, who sits in the US. Maxine, Trinidadian and US background. And Maxine is probably the one closest to the workforce. Cecilia also worked with us a little bit, but Maxine works with all the employees of the company as a coach. So she actually knows everybody's secrets. So everybody who's throwing darts at me, she knows Maxine within the organization. And I wanted to start, before I ask the questions, by just showing you the data that's out there. And these are, I will challenge all of you to look at any founder and any company that has made it to unicorn status, whether it is through growth, whether it is through money, it doesn't matter. And I want you to just look at them and look at company culture, and you will notice there is a pattern that keeps coming up. So interestingly, a report describes high turnover and toxic workplace culture at finance startup Revolut. Revolut, this founder was actually sitting in front of me at WeWork a couple weeks ago. His company just got valued at $32 billion in just a short period of time. Accused always of 24/7 workout burnout at a rampant place in his workplace. And then I want you guys to look at a recent study. It's a behavioral study that just came out this week. And it came out on some of the leaders we look at globally and we respect. And there's a common pattern that keeps coming up with them. And I just put this in here and I will share this with you guys. And it has to do, I'll give you some of the wording. Apple co-founder reportedly could be extremely blunt when sharing his opinions of workers' work. He demands excellence. You have to prove yourself every day or they got rid of you. We have another one saying, extremely blunt again. We have another one saying, natural crunch for time due to multiple roles. So there's if you look at it, there are all of these patterns coming out. And all of these patterns, I will be the first one to raise my hand and say I'm guilty of also. And I think many founders who are on a mission to scale their startups beyond the traditional, make no mistake, I think for some of us founders, our lives are not going to look like anybody else's lives. Our companies are not going to look like anybody else's company. And I think sometimes we all make the mistake of thinking it might, we're going to look like everybody else and we're expecting the same behavior. And sometimes it doesn't happen. And I'm going to stop right there and turn it over to all of you guys to unpack this topic. And I'm going to start first with Gurleen, right? And I'm going to start with, a question of what role does leadership play in shaping the culture? Let's start there and get your feedback. And then we can go to Cecilia and let's go to Maxine.
Hey, Salyan, and hello, everyone. And I'm pleased to be part of this session. And thank you so much for joining. What role does leadership play in shaping the culture? I think it starts from leadership. It actually starts from the founder of the organization, right? So putting the values or culture codes on the wall or talking about it at an annual team meeting is just a starting point. It's just a tip of the iceberg. But leadership has to really walk the talk, and not walk the talk, in fact. They have to talk the walk. Yeah, so action comes first before before words. They have to really emulate the culture that they are propagating. They really have to follow the culture. They have to model the right behavior. Otherwise, people will not follow it. And also, we sometimes make a mistake of thinking that this is only an HR's job. right? It's HR's job to build culture in the organization, but that's not true. HR can definitely help out. HR can definitely support the leadership, but it is the leadership who has to start and really act on the values, and that only has to trickle down the team. So leadership plays a very, very important and crucial role in shaping up the culture.
Okay. Cecilia, is there anything different or interesting you want to add to that?
What Gurleen was saying, I think she's right. And there is another aspect to this too. She mentioned leadership's role. We always forget the environment that we are working in. And this is the external factor that affects the way people behave in organizations, specifically in startups and, you know, high pressure contexts, which startups are usually. So the external world also affects how we behave as people, as leaders, and as employees, because toxicity in a workplace, it's not just a leader's responsibility, it's how the people react to this toxicity. So you have the external environment that is, you know, putting pressure on people all the time. It's a VUCA world. We all know the world we're living in is not the world that used to be. No, there is no certainty, there is no stability, and this affects the way people behave. So these are the external elements. The leader's legacy too, you know, what the leader wants to achieve, wants to keep as a legacy. This affects also the way that they will behave. It's not just their personality. It's not they're toxic and that's it. It's the legacy they want to leave behind. And the issue with leaders nowadays is they want to emulate other leaders. And the conditions and the situations that other leaders functioned within are different from the situations that leaders are confronted with today. And this is why today it's more critical than ever to keep people at the center of everything. Even though technology is, you know, going, you know, at like thousands and miles per hour, it's technology on its own doesn't drive businesses. We need to take care of our people nowadays more than ever before. So the way people react to the way the leaders are behaving also creates a toxic environment. So it's so many factors together, external factors, internal factors, the high pressure context, the team members enabling reactions. They, you know, you Sally, you said something, you were wonderful at the beginning, and you said, I did not put the mirror up. And this is what usually what employees do out of fear, out of, you know, lack of concern. Okay, so this is not our company, we don't care. And they enable these behaviors. They make leaders toxic, and that will affect later on. Toxic behaviors will affect the bottom line, whether we like it or not. So this is what I had to add to Gurleen's point of view.
Okay, and Maxine, what about you? What role does leadership play in shaping the culture? What do you have to add?
I want to build more on what Gurleen started saying, that leaders set the tone. And for me, leadership is not only the founder, the leaders are the board, the leaders are the team leaders, but leaders, the leader does set the tone. So I'd like to make a comparison to parents. For example, children live what they learn and learn what they live. And a leader needs to set the tone for the kind of environment that, that he or she wants to create. But in setting that tone, a couple of things that a leader must do is listen. So the leader, you know, as you said, you didn't set the mirror up to yourself, the leader needs to listen. As a matter of fact, they are, in terms of some of the surveys that have been done recently, in terms of, hey, what are the soft skills that are needed by leaders today? And listening comes up at top. Listening comes out of the top. So my take is that leaders need to listen, because if leaders are listening to what their people are saying, they will pick up the flare-ups. They will pick up, some of the passive aggressive. They will pick up some of the fears and insecurities. So I will stop there and say leaders need to set the tone. And one of the ways of setting the tone is listening.
Yeah. Okay. I love that. All right. And I'm going, IPEC, I'm seeing a bunch of comments from you. I'm going to get to all of them shortly. So I'm going to ask a question to all of you. What, how do you, how can people be aware of their own toxicity?
Oh, yeah.
Cecilia, you start?
Yeah, they have to be willing to assess their own behaviors. Maxine said it, they have to listen, they have to be aware, they have to be willing to assess how their behaviors affect others. Otherwise, nothing happens. This is the prerequisite, the willingness, the openness, and then they need to observe their own behaviors. Just sit back and observe how their behaviors affect others. And they have to avoid, I would say, these, toxic behaviors, like demeaning others, public shaming, blurred boundaries between work and life. All these will affect, and then they need to practice this golden rule, 2 golden rules. And Gurleen mentioned them. Do what you preach, be a role model, and then treat others the way you would like to be treated. If people are not aware of this, that they are treating people differently from the way they would like to be treated, there has to be a willingness to open up and understand that what they're doing is creating something bad for the organization. Ultimately, it will affect the bottom line. So this is my take.
Yeah, and interestingly, Cecilia, the question, you led it only to the leader. But I want you guys, Gurleen and Maxine, the question is, how can people be aware? This is people across an entire organization, be aware of their toxicity. I think very often we forget, where I started with, I didn't raise a mirror on myself. It's very easy to blame the leader, right? To blame the organization, because we never actually raise the mirror on ourselves. So Gurleen, how would you answer this? How can people be aware of their toxicity?
I think one is being a little more open-minded, and also accepting that we are all human beings. And Daniel Kahneman has stated that we are all biased. So if I say that I'm the most rational person on earth, that itself is a bias. So understanding and first acknowledging and accepting that we are all biased. Now, the second question is identifying your biases, that what is the lens that you see the world from. So what you can do is probably ask people for feedback. And when I say ask people for feedback, I don't want to say that go and say that, hey, any feedback for me, guys. That is not a specific or a targeted question. So ask targeted questions like, what is it that I can do or change in my work style that would make it easier for you to work with me, right? So that way you'll be able to understand how you're being perceived by others. That's one. Second question, what people can probably ask their superiors or their juniors or their peers is 2 things that I'm doing really well and 2 things where I can probably improve on. Right? That gives you a window to kind of understand how you're being perceived by others, because a lot of times perception is the reality. We don't know our dark side, and other people can see our dark side really, really vividly. And what happens is people don't feel comfortable sharing their point of view, especially when it is a critical feedback. So in order to create that space, we have to create a psychological safe space. And that also is a process. It starts from belongingness, then it goes to cognitive diversity. Only when you feel belong can you challenge each other fully. And the third step of psychological safety would be innovation. And that's how innovation would happen. So I think to answer in short, I think feedback, a continuous feedback will help you assess your gaps and see your toxicity.
Good. I love that. And I love that you have science backing that, Gurleen. I love a good bit of science. Maxine, what about you?
And again, I'm tagging on to Gurleen because feedback is the essence of that. And learning how to give and receive feedback is something that people have to learn. Not everyone naturally knows how to give and receive feedback, and it's a two-way street. Some of us only want the feedback about the things that are good about us and things that are nice about us, but we need to learn. And in learning how to give feedback, we have to learn how not to attack the person, but speak to the behavior, as opposed to you this and what you do and what you do. And this is what, you talk about when you say this or when you do that, that causes me to do this. Or when the person is giving the feedback to the other person, Sally Ann, when you speak to me or when you discipline me in public, I'm uncomfortable with that. I rescind. But the thing is, feedback, learning how to accept and receive feedback, give and receive feedback is not natural to everyone. So it has to be something that's done continuously in conversations. So I have an example of that kind of thing in an environment where I was involved in the transformation of the organization. And when we had done the first stage of the transformation, we started having meetings with people where the management team sat in front and staff can ask anything they wanted to ask or make any comment they wanted. And the first time we did that, no one said anything. Everyone was silent. No one said a thing. It would have been easy to say, well, the people don't want to speak, so we're not going to do this anymore. The second time we did it, no one said anything. But by the third time, people opened up and they started talking. So my advice here is to don't rush it. Give people an opportunity to become comfortable in an open speaking environment, and give them the opportunity to become self-aware. Also bring persons in who can teach them about the Johari window so they get a chance to understand what they know about themselves and what they don't know about themselves. There's stuff like that can happen to help to create that environment of self-awareness and giving and receiving feedback.
So I'm going to ask this question going on, thank you for that, Maxine, that might not be on here. What role does culture, because we're in a diverse world, working remotely, what role does culture play in toxicity? Gurleen.
I think culture has a role to play in toxicity. For instance, if your culture kind of rewards performance over relationships, then it is a recipe of a toxic culture, because you're only focusing on results and people are probably slogging, they're working for 15 hours, 18 hours, and we are rewarding that sort of behavior. Mm-hmm. What happens? The attrition kind of, people start leaving the jobs. Start joining the competitors. There is a lot of toxicity. There is a lot of passive aggressive behavior. There is a lot of gossip. And for the long term, I think it's a recipe of failure. So leaders and culture agents really need to kind of sit and really kind of have a culture that they are kind of building. Is it only for like a short-term goal that you want to kind of make quick buck and sell your organization to a bigger fish? Is it only 1 year or a 2-year work, that 2-week horizon you're looking at, or you're looking to build a sustainable organization that will go for like 10 years, 15 years, even 20 years? So what is your end goal really? If the goal is short-term, 1 year, 2 year, toxic culture will happen by default, I believe, because the horizon is really short.
So there, Gurleen, I will challenge you on that. The companies, if I look at the top 50 companies 10 years ago to the top 50 companies today, only about 25% of them even exist anymore as the top 50 companies. Companies are getting acquired, disappearing because they're all being acquired. There's only about 4 or 5 giants that exist in the world right now we can talk about. So that way of companies of the past, if I will exist for the next 20 years and 30 years and 50 years, it's not really realistic anymore. We are in a world right now where whoever grabs market share the fastest, certainly if you're on a certain type of business, but let's assume you're not in it for, social impact. You're not in it you're in it because you want to actually scale and build a company at a massive level. Does that mean that all companies are toxic who is not on a 10-year or 15-year mission?
No, so I didn't mean to generalize it. So it's about what is it that you are giving to the company that is acquiring you? Is it only the numbers, or you're giving this incredible team that is going to build sustainable organization? It's very easy to put lipstick on a pig, right? It's easy to do that. I can show it through the numbers as someone who has a small startup maybe, and it's going to get acquired. But we have to see that what is it that we are giving to the bigger organization. So it's important if we are giving a team of people who knows their values, right? Who have each other's back. There is psychological safety in the organization. And then only innovation will happen. Otherwise, it will fall eventually. Sooner or later, it will fall.
Okay. And what about you, Cecilia? What role does culture of your working from home, your home culture, and the role, and I'm going to push on this and say the role of women in your home environment and being in these types of workplaces, how does that impact toxicity in the workplace? You're on mute.
I was just listening to what you were saying. It's what I am listening to now. It's that a workplace is toxic in absolute terms, which is it's not true. Some people thrive in these environments, and you would find it weird, but they do, and others are destroyed by it. So culture is where does it come from? It comes from the values that we try to instill in a company. And usually we say the values come from the leaders. Yes, this is true. It trickles down the organization. However, toxicity, a toxic work is not a toxic workplace in absolute terms. When we hire people, we hire them for culture fit more than we hire them for their technical skills. At least this is, I try to get a fit with the culture, because if the culture does not fit between the individual values and the company's values, everybody is saying the same thing, it will not work. So this culture fit is key to assess when we hire people, when we bring them in first.
Okay.
This would be my take on it.
Okay, let me ask another question. How can a one-size-fits-all approach by leaders, this is for you, Maxine, create a toxic culture?
Okay. So that is the biggest mistake that a leader can make, a one-size-fits-all, because that tells me that the leader is not listening. So because while the leader cannot have a policy to suit each individual, likes and dislikes, the leader needs to get enough information, and that's what those conversations are necessary. Enough information from the staff, from the employees, from the team members, and enough open and honest, and sometimes I say sometimes the team members are also complicit in terms of the toxicity, because some team members enjoy the blaming and the murmuring and the complaining and so on. But really and truly, if there's an environment where people can speak and the leaders, and I say leaders at every level, are listening, then they understand, oh, the people that are a part of my team, flexibility is important to them. The people that are part of my team, they need intentional opportunities to connect and so on, so that one size fits all can never work, or it works to the detriment of the organization. We need to come up with ways that can satisfy at least most of the employees. Yeah. Okay. So it cannot be everyone must come into the office. Let's look and see how we can do that. Is it that some can come in on some days, so that some days they're working from home, or is it that we can come up with a different way. The word hybrid is used a lot these days, but come up with a way that everyone can fit into that flexible environment. Those who want to come into the office every day, fine. But some who want to come in 2 days a week, can that work? And that's my take on the one size cannot fit all.
Okay. Gurleen, I'm going to ask you this. How do I, as a team member, contribute to or enable a toxic environment? And we'll have all three of us take that.
Absolutely.
Enable a toxic environment.
How do you contribute or you enable? And you know what, these questions, just so that you guys know, nobody really ever asks, right? Because it's turning the mirror now on yourself. We always look at the organization, we look at the leader, and I wanted this to be about, and that's why I'm asking this question, because not all of us are leaders within the group, and many of us, whether we are within as coaches, etc., we want to also be able to look at the other side of that coin. So what's your take on that?
So before answering this, I'll just explain culture a little bit. In very, very simple terms, culture is how things get done when no one is watching, right? So a team member contributes or enables a toxic environment when they don't show integrity, when they don't follow the right way of doing things, and they only resort to quick fixes, for example, or they only resort to results. They don't take into consideration the feelings of the person they are dealing with, or the team that they are handling, or someone may have any issue for that matter, but they are pressing a little too hard on the results only. I don't know if we have friends from India here, but there is an example. There is this film called Chak De India. So it's about this hockey, women hockey team. And there is this match where this player, Preeti Sabharwal, and she's actually making a lot of goals back to back, and she's not passing the ball to her fellow sports person. And she wins, and the whole team wins the championship as well. But the coach is not happy. Why the coach is not happy? Because she did not demonstrate teamwork, right? Now cut to a team member or a leader who was enabling a toxic environment. That person would be celebrating that success of winning that championship. But it's about how you get things done. It's also about the journey that you are taking. It's also about the values. How are you going to do it? That is important. Yeah. So team member, if they're resorting to quick fixes, focusing only on the results and not on the relationship, that means they are enabling toxic environment.
Okay, what about you, Cecilia? What is your thought on this? How does a team member enable or contribute to a toxic environment?
Anytime a team member acts against their own values, they are driving toxic culture. And anytime they, go to frequent drama, gossip, negative conversations, complaints, blame game, they are contributing, because this is why it's not just one side, it's everyone that contributes to a toxic workplace. So yes, the employees have a huge role when they just pitch in, they go with the flow of gossip and negative conversations, and yes, and when they expect to be treated differently from others, that also triggers, and this enables the toxic culture. And having I'm not accountable, I'm at a higher level, I cannot be held accountable for my actions. This enables toxic environments too. So each and every time you put yourself out of the values, out of the boundaries that have been created in terms of, ethics, treating people with respect, etc., etc., this will contribute to having a toxic environment. How do you?
Sorry, go ahead. Sorry, no, please go ahead, Cecilia.
How do you refrain from doing this? This is where the role of policies and procedures and codes of conduct, when they are agreed on and shared by everyone, agreed and signed on by everyone, this is where it helps to align everyone towards one single direction. We respect everyone. We do not have negative conversations. We do not gossip. We just talk directly to the person. We don't complain, behind everybody's back. We just go and say things are wrong. Because each and every time we do this, we're contributing to the toxic environment. So let's be clear about how we want people to behave in our organization. Let's share it relentlessly all the time, and let's model it, each and every one of us.
Okay. I have an interesting comment from Valeria before I go to Maxine. Valeria is in Europe. The meaning and definition of a toxic culture is varied in different countries based on different leadership models.
And cultures.
Maxine, in your answering, how does an individual, I want you to kind of think about that. The meaning and definition of toxic culture is very varied in different countries. And, in the world that we live in, where we're leading teams all over the world, it's a very interesting time, right? On that. So how would you, going back to the original question, which is, how do I, as the team member, contribute or enable a toxic environment? Can you answer that?
Sure, absolutely. And I also want to touch what you just mentioned, what Valeria mentioned.
Yeah, Valeria.
To address both. And Cecilia hit it on the head. There are various ranges of behaviors in terms of toxic behaviors, so that a team member who is self-aware needs to be aware. He's the word aware again, that I'm always complaining. I'm always blaming everybody else. I don't take responsibility. I'm always critical of everything. Even if it's a good thing, I'm critical of everything. Those are signals. I constantly need validation. Those are signals that I am courting. I am courting a toxic behavior, But however, I want to turn it on its head. And talk about flipping it. How does a team member influence and reject the toxicity around? I want to flip it on that, because really, you don't have to be a leader, or you don't have to be a team lead or to influence behavior. Among general team members, there are always what we call informal leaders and influencers, so that really among them, there can be people who can reject the gossip. That's another way. There can be people who can reject the passive aggressive behavior. There are people who can speak up. And if you have one who can speak up, will speak up, So for example, sometimes very, very small things happen in organizations that cause people to be fearful or cause people not to speak up. Yeah. So I was in another company, I was coaching someone recently, and there was a small thing that occurred, a communication thing, where the person may have been left out of something. And that person was carrying that for a long time, thinking that he or she was rejected. And it took 2 or 3 coaching sessions for me to really talk with that person, to convince them, speak up and find out why you were left out. And the person said she was afraid because it's intimidating. However, after spending time with that person, so eventually the person did speak up and ask why was they left out, and they realized, oh, it was really something really very small, and it was corrected almost instantly. So and that person has now become someone who is speaking out and so on within the organization. So really and truly among the team members, and that's why I said earlier on that team members could be complicit. They could enjoy the ride of the toxicity, but among them, there's always someone who can step up and influence. And I'm saying team members also need to take responsibility. It is not, culture is not the responsibility of the leader only. It is the responsibility of everyone. I want to just jump, I saw when the meaning and definitions differ from culture to culture, and that person is so correct, because what may be offensive in one culture is not offensive in another. And what comes to mind for me is sexual harassment. And sexual harassment takes different flavors and different colors in different cultures. what is okay in one culture is very offensive and could even be against the law in another culture. So I just wanted to agree with Valerie here that that is indeed so. There are cultures where people speak up, easily, and then there are cultures where you have to know your place. So even we come now to when we are bringing people into a diverse environment where we are bringing people from different places, we need to understand that even at the recruitment stage to make sure we are bringing the right person in this particular culture.
Yeah, and I love that by Valeria, because I think as a founder, if there was one thing I have been most guilty of, would be not considering how my form of leadership might not be right for certain countries and certain places in terms of my hiring of what is normal within culture. I'm a very direct person. In some cultures that is very offensive. Like in Japan, you're not very direct. There's some cultures that you can't be, you just can't be that way. And I think we in hiring and looking at skills and looking whether it's soft skills and hard skills, I often say I've now started looking at, are we the right pace and place for people?
Absolutely.
Because beyond all of the skills, the pace, as I said to you, trying to scale, a company at a massively fast rate, and the place, extremely transparent, extremely direct. And for some people, that is shocking, and that's very toxic. And the pace and place has really kind of, and then you are correct. I have those who thrive in that environment. I think one of you said that some people thrive. I have those who literally are flying and thriving in that environment. And it was, it reminds me of when I was at Kareem. At Kareem, it produced in a matter of, that short span of time, 5 years, there were about 187 that have now gone on to create the next unicorns in the region who started off there, and they thrived in that growth metrics environment. As I said, the leaders were not bad people, but they were on a mission, and either you were on the mission or you were off the mission, and there was casualty if you were not on the mission because they didn't stop for anybody. Yeah, I thought that was really, really interesting. Let me ask this question. Let me ask you guys a question that I didn't see on there. As coaches, because you're all coaches in here, what would be the first 3 things you would do to address or to assess toxicity and then to address it in a workplace? Gurleen, let me start with you. To assess it and then to address it.
Okay, so this is something I heard in one of Simon Sinek's videos. Go to any team, ask the team members who is the asshole.
Mm-hmm. I love that. Yeah.
That way you'll be very quickly able to kind of recognize the patterns in people who are creating that toxic environment, right? If there are a lot of people who are sharing 1 or 2 people's names, coming up with 1 or 2 people's names, so who are the people who probably need coaching? Other than doing focus group discussions and one-on-one discussions, you can always do assessments. You can always do anonymous surveys. You can talk to people. That's how you assess it. If as an organization you want to go a little formal route, you can definitely do a culture audit. Have someone from outside do culture audit for you, because it becomes difficult for internal folks to do it, because generally people don't feel comfortable sharing it with inside folks. They're more comfortable sharing it with outsider. So that's one. The second question, the follow-up question was, how do you kind of fix it? That was the second part of the question.
Yes.
Okay.
Or at least the first 3 steps, right? Because I'm sure it's a process.
Yeah, definitely. It's a process, and culture has to manage and be evolved, because it is more like a building. It needs maintenance. Sometimes it needs renovation as well, right? So you need to do the culture audit really well, that, okay, these are your values and this is your strategy. And think back also, think in retrospect that when we were leaders, or we are leaders, when we started kind of codifying the culture, we must have thought about the strategy. And if there is some gap, then what is the gap exactly? Why are we not displaying those values in our actions? Right?
Mhm.
So through culture audit, you'll be able to identify the gaps and then probably renovate the culture, evolve the culture according to how the world has changed around you.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right.
Point. Yeah.
Perfect. Perfect. Thank you, Gurleen, for that. Gurleen, you and I have never met. I like you. You're very, very methodical in your talk. Good job. All right, Cecilia. Let's talk about the same question. How do you first assess? How do you go about assessing? And then the next is how do you go about fixing? And I promise all of you, I will get to all of the questions. I'm seeing some really good questions, particularly from those of you from Scandinavian culture and all different, because you have all different kinds of questions that are coming up. Cecilia.
Yeah, I would start with the level of trust in the organization. And I would look at the accountability.
Mm-hmm.
And these two are, for me, the best indicators to assess a toxic culture or not. So if the level of trust among staff and between staff and management is low, this is where we need to dig further. And let's look at the accountability. Who is held accountable? Who is not held accountable? So these are the two factors that I would look into first. And then, of course, as Gurleen said, you have to look at your set of values, etc., and how things are unfolding in your organization.
So I'm gonna ask you a question on your trust. And I have some of our team members in here. So we have these weekly stand-ups with this. I think Gurleen, you might know her, Ferosha. And Ferosha did a trust session with the team, and trust is like a two-sided coin. There's two parts of it, right? And trust, the first part of it is character, and the second part of it is competence. And a lot of times, knowing that now makes a big difference, because we can trust the character of the people, but we could not trust their competence, right? And it was something that was an eye-opener for the whole team, right? Because then then when you divided it up so clearly and they started kind of testing what's the one thing you want to work on, it became really clear we might all trust each other's character, but some of us might not trust each other. We all wanted to work on our competence, which is our ability to depend on each other to follow through on things. So that was something that we just learned as a group, as a company, that, it's kind of sometimes when we talk about human skills or soft skills and we say generic things like communication, but communication might have underneath it the ability to negotiate, the ability to have crucial conversations, the ability to, so when you said that word trust, because it's so, fresh in my mind, I wanted to kind of put that note out there. Maxine, you on that question, how do you assess culture, and how do you go about fixing it?
How do you go about fixing it? And that therein lies the rub, because it's no one thing, it's a combination of things that must be done on an ongoing basis, so that same trust eventually, you don't get trust right away, the same trust eventually emerges. So it's one-on-one conversations, it's team conversations, and we come right back again to the listening, because we have the conversations, we hear things, but then how do we start putting some of those things in place? And some of those things we can't put in place at the same time. It's also doing employee surveys, so people get a chance anonymously to give the feedback. So it's a variety of things that must be done on an ongoing basis. And some may say that takes time. So for example, a supervisor told me once, it takes so much time dealing with the people that it prevents me from doing my job. And I say, well, the people and dealing with the people is the job, because once you can deal with that, the other things will fall into place. You will know who is competent, you will know who is not, you will know how about recruiting and putting people in the right roles, because sometimes because people are in the wrong roles, that that can cause the toxicity to happen because they're not doing meaningful work. But how will you know they're not doing meaningful work to suit them? What is meaningful work for them is because we didn't have the conversation. We don't know. We just said the person meets the hard skills and we put them there and expect them to do meaningful work. So it's a variety of things we have to do at the same time and not expect it all to happen like that. Fixing the culture takes time. I love the word that Gurleen used, renovate. Because
I like it. It is a good word.
Yes, to build a house is faster than to renovate a house, believe it or not. If you take it into that context, it's the same thing with culture. It takes time, and sometimes in this VUCA world, we want everything to happen immediately.
Yeah. All right. So I'm going to ask this other question, and then we're getting kind of close to our time. Future trends. How is culture evolving in the 21st century? Now with these, hold on, Gen, I don't know, what are we on? Gen Y or Gen something? I'm not really sure.
Yeah. Which letter are we up to now? We're on Z. We'll be on Z.
We are in Z. Okay. I wasn't sure what gen we're in. So how is culture evolving? Sorry, somebody needs to put their mute on. Who is that? Who needs to put? Neha, can you please put your mute on, please? Thank you. Yes. Okay. So let's now let's answer that question about how is culture evolving in the 21st century.
Yep, it's evolving and we all know about it. It's a VUCA world, we all know about it. And we are dealing with millennials and Gen Zs mostly nowadays. And especially after pandemic, I think a lot of things have changed. One trend that I see is flexibility, increased flexibility, no one size fits all approach. Really like customizing solutions, using situational leadership is something that I see as a trend. I think if I were to kind of, because I am methodical, so if I were to kind of see it in parts, so I think for Gen Z and millennials, it's not about the paycheck anymore. Of course, money is important, but that's the hygiene factor now, right? For Gen Z and millennials, it's the purpose that matters. Why are they doing what they are doing? It's a purpose. Second is, I think we have to move from job satisfaction to development. Now, we are not dealing with old school workers or traditional workers that they have to be prodded or kind of forced to work. Now, people are really like, they care about their careers. They're really serious about their careers. So as organizations, we have to develop them in the organization also, give them growth paths in the organization so that they don't leave the organization. Growth is really important. Development is really important, not just satisfaction. The third trend, which I see is from my weakness to my strengths. This is what I see in a lot of my coaching sessions. A lot of nowadays organizations ask me to focus on strengths of the organization and how do we leverage the strength of the individual rather than fixing their weakness. So focusing on their strengths. The next trend would be from an annual review to going to a continuous feedback. Ongoing conversations is something that I see. So very quick conversations, giving feedback in real time, coaching the employee rather than holding that person accountable and saying that, hey, you did this mistake, you did that mistake, but really coaching the person. And the next thing would be the trend that I see changing is from my job to my life. You know, new age employees do not look at job as if it's a life compared to how it used to happen with baby boomers or Generation X. My job is part of my life. So how do we kind of respect their boundaries? How do we give that life and work integration so that we arrive at a win-win solution rather than only one party getting the benefit of it? So these are some of the trends that I see.
I love that. All right, Cecilia, what about you?
I would say if we go back to David Rock's model, the SCARF model, where he says that status, certainty, autonomy, etc., these could trigger either reward or threat responses. I think the organizations in the future will need to deactivate the threat responses, and minimize everything that has to do with uncertainty, everything that has to do with, push for more autonomy for people, more fairness, more relatedness, because Gurleen said that loyalty, there is no more loyalty anymore. And it's from both sides, not just from the employee's side, it's also from the employer side. So we need to, as organizations looking towards the future, we need to deactivate as much as possible these threat responses that are related and linked to uncertainty and lack of autonomy, lack of relatedness, lack of fairness in organizations.
Okay, and we will give Maxine the closing note, but before I do, everyone who is coming in already for the 7:30 session, we're going to be a couple minutes late, but please stay on. And also, before anyone leaves, there is a Trustpilot link. Please go in and fill it out and tell the speakers how you feel about the session, how you feel about their contribution. This is where, when we do these sessions, this is where you get to tell them what you loved, what you didn't love, so take that link and fill it out. We'll leave a couple of minutes before we go into the other session to do it. Maxine, sure. Hold on, Maxine has her plate full. Hold on, I have to say to you, because she's the official coach for us at Glee, working with the team. And has really made a world of difference. I have to say to you, I never would have thought in 1,000,001 years over this 3 months, and the team they're all here. They will tell you how they all feel about, having that coaching. Now we've made it mandatory as part of onboarding, 3 coaching sessions. We've made it mandatory if teams are struggling, the entire team goes to coaching to sort their issues. So we removed it completely from HR, which is more on a disciplinarian, not hitting your OKRs, to more, how are you going to work with this as a team in a coaching session? And really that has worked wonders for us. So Maxine, I'm going to have you end on the note, future trends. How is culture evolving in the 21st century?
Sure. And some of it has been touched already in terms of the flexibility and
so
work-life balance and so on. But let me just, 1, 2, 3 things quickly. It's important to show the team member how what they do fits into the bigger picture. So it's not just I'm doing this, and siloed. It's important to do that. People want to know, and that links up to the whole thing of purpose. Also, the conversations are critical. As a soft skill coach, I have noticed that there are 3 buckets: communication, which is a huge bucket, collaboration, and creativity. And the organizations have to find a way to do those 3 at the same time, helping people to understand how to work in teams, even if you have to teach them how to work in teams. Not everyone comes knowing how to work in a team. So communication, collaboration, and creativity in terms of being able to innovate and do creative things and feel that I'm contributing. And last but not least, coaching is definitely becoming an important trend. And not only coaching, not only bringing a coach when something is wrong, but having a coach there available to team members that they can access, as a sounding board, as an accountability partner, as a strategy partner. That definitely is becoming more and more. And other coaches sitting on the panel may agree, because they too may be called in to support the organization from a proactive way as opposed to a disciplinary way. Just want to end by saying an organization doesn't start off by being toxic. Toxic happens if we're not listening. That's the other trend in terms of the data out there. I think it is Australia has recruited Deloitte Touche to do some surveys, and what are the soft skills that as a country we need as we move forward. And listening and empathy came up at the top of the list. So that too is a trend in terms of the workplace, listening and trend. And I listened to a podcast recently with a very successful person. He was a Marine, then he was very successful in the corporate world afterwards. And he was asked, if you have to talk to your younger self now, what advice will you give? And he said, listen more. And that is where the rubber hits the road. We all need to listen more, both leaders and team members. We all need to listen more.
Okay.
Yes.
So I will end on this note of, raising my hand. I think this is probably one of the things that defines my leadership with my team, which scares them, is that wherever there is the soft or the dent in the armor, even with myself, I actually put my finger in it. So as being accused many times of being a toxic leader, clearly I was going to hold this conversation and have a conversation about it. And clearly I make it a conversation that happens every day. And in many ways that defines my leadership, right? My leadership is about being a imperfectly, perfectly flawed individual, just like my team members. And we forget that. We forget very often that our leaders are humans too. And our leaders, I remind my team sometimes to go, somebody should ask me how my day is going, right? And sometimes I want to hear that I'm doing okay too. And toxicity, I will end on this note. I really think it's like a tennis match. And, you have to decide whether you're going to slam the ball back or not. And sometimes that's not by active behavior, that's by passive behavior. You're participating in it sometimes. So I want to thank all of you for being here. Hold on, as an accused toxic leader in rehab, I want to thank all of you for being here today. I hope this conversation was helpful to all of you. We will continue having more of these conversations. And I encourage all of you to really, talk about the things that are the dents, because that's really where all the magic happens, when you're able to talk about those things very, very openly. Your vulnerability is your strength, right?